At 5:00 a.m., my phone buzzed. One ring, one whisper. "Don't wear your red coat today. Why, you'll see." Click. I stared at the coat by the door, that safety red I bought so drivers wouldn't miss me in winter fog. Funny how a color can turn into a crosshair. I left it hanging and walked out half-dressed. By 9:00, I reached the bus stop I've used for years. The morning was wrong too still, like the world holding its breath. Then flashing patrol lights, a twitch of yellow tape, boots in frost. An officer's palm floated to stop me, but his warning came late. The wind lifted a white tarp enough to show a sleeve. Red. My stomach fell through the ground. Someone had been here earlier wearing a coat like mine, standing where I stand on Tuesdays. She didn't make it to the bus. Tell me not to wear it. Tell me why a color knows my name. I'm 63, fourth generation on a Montana farm that knows my footsteps better than any city ever could. After Frank died, the calendar simplified Tuesdays and Fridays. I ride the bus into town, groceries, a library book lunch, at Betty's, then home before the mountains turn purple. Quiet is not loneliness when the land answers you back. When wind in wheat still sounds like a man laughing somewhere out of sight. Routine keeps grief folded like a handkerchief in a pocket. Until this morning, a 5 a.m. whisper turned my safety into a riddle, and my week into a crime scene. It's strange how quickly the familiar curdles the hallway, the keys by the door, the vote hook, every object suddenly auditioning for evidence. I thought getting older meant smaller stories. Turns out age is just a wider field of view. If someone dressed in my red stood in my spot and never left, then my quiet life has been mapped by someone else's hands. Robert is my boy, grown into a man who apologizes with coffee instead of words. He's kind, patient, and soft in the places the world likes to push. Vanessa, his wife, arrives like a realtor's brochure. Glossy folded numbers, bolded outcomes, pre-decided. She calls it planning. I call it pressure, always circling my acreage with a developer's smile. And Danny, 19, my compass, still believes decency wins if you stay at the table long enough. At Sunday dinner, the air has been tight lately, like a belt one notch too far. Vanessa lays out spreadsheets between the mashed potatoes, and the roast says assisted living as if it were a scented candle. Robert looks down. Danny looks at me. We are 3 witnesses to the same conversation and 3 very different juries. I said no, not because I can't leave, but because the ground remembers who worked it. That was before a red coat turned the argument into something uglier. I bought that coat in Billings 3 winters ago, paid extra for the color the salesman called cherry visibility. Drivers see red in the fog, he said. Hunters see red against timber. I wore it like a flag that meant she's still here. Safety is a story you tell yourself until the plot flips. After the call, the red looked loud, reckless, like a bullseye you hang on your own ribs. I left it on the hook and felt disloyal the way you feel putting down an old dog. I told myself I was just being careful, that I'd grab it later. By 9, it had become a stranger's uniform and a dead woman's last photograph beneath a tarp. If someone wanted the red to mean me, then the coat wasn't protection, it was bait. Some people hunt with rifles. Some hunt with paperwork, and some apparently hunt with a color and a timetable they learned by watching me. Tom Brennan wears the same face he wore in high school. Except the laugh lines have become worry lines, and the Letterman jacket turned into a uniform. Evie, he said gently the way men talk when the ground just opened. He told me the victim wore a red coat, my red, and the words didn't land so much as freeze mid-air like breath in February. I thought of every Tuesday I'd stood there, the notebook. I read the bench with the carved initials, the way the wheat fields flatten in the wind. I thought of the bus driver who greets me by name, who would have opened the doors and said, "Morning, Ms. Foster," to anyone wearing that red. Tom's hand hovered near my elbow, not touching, but close enough to count as mercy. Police lights keep their own daylight. Yellow tape makes a room wherever it flutters. I understood something awful routine isn't just comfort. It's a schedule for predators. I repeated the phone call, the whisper, the warning, the click. "Where's your grandson now?" Tom asked. "Somewhere safe," I wanted to lie. My calls rolled straight to voicemail, each beep worse than the last. Silence has weight when it belongs to a boy who always answers. I tried again, then again, bargaining with my own ringtone, like it owed me a miracle. Detective voices practiced on grief, slow measured kind to your face. Suspicious on their notepads, circled around the name, Danny. Did he know the victim? Had he mentioned trouble? My chest argued with my brain. He's a good kid. Good kids get used. The winter air felt close, like a sermon without a door. I have outlived coyotes, droughts, and taxmen. I have not outlived the terror that comes when a child you love goes quiet. Somewhere between that whisper and this tape, a secret switched hands. I needed to know which hands. Paper can look more official than truth. They showed me a deed with my name stamped, signed filed 3 weeks ago. The signature had my slant, my stubborn loop on the F, even the impatient tail I make when I've signed too many checks. I hadn't signed that deed, not in the light of day, not in the dark, not under threat. But the page smiled like a counterfeit saint halo, witness's notary seal. Fraud wears a suit it can't afford and hopes no one checks the hem. My farm is not scenic acreage. It's a ledger of backs and seasons. Whoever slid this through the county wanted more than land. They wanted me dispossessed in public and discredited in private. I felt 2 chills at once, the kind you get when you see your handwriting on a lie, and the kind you get when you realize someone has been standing close enough to learn your hand. Across the road, a late-model luxury sedan idled like a thought. Someone was trying to swallow. Behind the glass, Vanessa. No wave, no shame, just that cool real estate face, appraising the scene as if tragedy were a price point. Our eyes met, and I watched her do math. That's what she does best, subtract people. Add property, divide families, multiply profits. Then she eased away like a realtor leaving an open house after making sure the flowers looked real. You can love your son and still not trust his judgment. You can love your grandson and still fear the adult world he's wandered into. But with Vanessa, love doesn't enter the sentence. Only leverage does. In that idle moment, I understood this wasn't pressure anymore. This was a play. And my coat had been an opening move, bright as bait on a hook. She drove off. I stood there thinking, fine. Let's see who's writing whose script. Detective Roxanne Merrick speaks in careful temperatures. Warm enough to keep you talking, cool enough to keep your words from fogging her lens. She asked about Danny's classes, his shifts at the hardware store, about Sunday dinners and that red coat. She asked about my routines like she was mapping a deer's path to water. I told her everything I could remember, the small and the stupid, because in a murder, even throwaway details get promoted. Halfway through, I felt the oddest sensation, like the house in a stage play when you notice the walls don't quite touch the floor. I was living inside somebody's set, the furniture placed to direct my steps, the props moved when I wasn't looking. Merrick wrote. I watched the pen, not her eyes. Some people catch fish with lines, some catch them with nets. She was the net. I prayed I was the fish that remembered where the rocks are. Robert hurried in with a man who smelled faintly of leather and billable hours. Mom, let him handle it, my son said, as if handing me off to a specialist who repairs mothers. Peter Mitchell introduced himself like a handshake could notarize trust. No more statements, he advised smoothly, for your own protection. Protection from what? My own innocence. If I'm not charged, why am I muzzled? He talked in hedges and fences, prudent, advisable best practice. The kind of words that herd you into smaller and smaller pens, until the only door left is the one he's holding. I have met his type at closing tables, men who place documents the way magicians place cups. Confident you'll follow the wrong hand. Robert's eyes were tired, loyal, scared. When a son is torn between his mother and his marriage, he always chooses keeping the peace. I smiled like a woman who doesn't mind being underestimated. Back at the farmhouse, a drawer sighed open, and Vanessa stood with her hand inside my life. Legal documents, she said, like the phrase absolved her fingers. Whether you recall it or not, you signed. There are sentences that bruise worse than slaps. I asked how long she'd been carrying a pen for my signature. She called me stubborn, unsafe a liability to myself. People like Vanessa prefer paperwork to arguments. Paper doesn't argue back. I told her to close the drawer and leave. She scanned the kitchen the way wolves count sheep. Control isn't loud. It's quiet hands on hinges. Quiet footprints in dust. Quiet confidence that the system loves a tidy version of events. She left a clean citrus smell and a promise in her eyes this would proceed with or without my consent. Standing in my kitchen, I realized the fight had already moved into a courtroom I hadn't entered yet. My phone shivered on the table. Unknown number, midnight, Clearwater Mill. Come alone, strawberry summer. I was back in the backyard with a 7-year-old boy and a strawberry patch, too ambitious for our stomachs. Strawberry summer is our code for trust. Me no questions hurry. People say teenagers forget childhood. They don't. They warehouse it for emergencies. Midnight at the old mill could be a trap, or it could be the only honest invitation inside this mess. I texted nothing back and listened to the house settle. Old wood translating wind. If someone wanted my land, my name, my routine, they'd also want my fear. I decided not to gift it. I would go without the red coat, without a witness, with nothing but a phone, a prayer, and the kind of anger that walks like calm. When the clock hands kissed 12, I'd be there. If this story wanted me, center stage, I'd choose my entrance. I pulled on the old brown jacket, the one with frayed elbows, and hay dust in the seams, and left the red coat on its hook like a dare I refused to accept. If this was a trap, it would meet a woman who survived worse than snares. I took the truck, not the car. The truck forgives mistakes and remembers back roads. I slid my phone to silent, texted, no one left a note on the table that said only midnight. Fear does strange math. It adds noise and subtracts courage unless you pin it to a purpose. Mine was simple. Find the boy, follow the thread pull until the whole sweater comes apart. The farmhouse sighed as I shut the door, and I told it I'd be back. I have always come back. I drove with the windows cracked to keep me awake, the winter air slicing my cheeks, the dashboard clock crawling toward 12. A whisper had called me out. Resolve would walk me in. A pair of headlights settled behind me at a courteous distance, the kind you learn about from men who practice surveillance for a living. Too far for a plate. Too steady for a nervous cousin. The car never closed, never drifted. It mirrored my lane changes like we'd rehearsed. I let it follow to the old cottonwood, then slipped right, not left, toward a logging road Frank and I used to take when we chased elk tracks and quiet. I killed my lights at the turn, counted to 3, and felt the dark pour over me like water. The truck remembered the ruts my bones had mapped years ago. Branches licked the paint. The rear view showed nothing but my own breath. Behind me, the highway rolled on oblivious. Whoever they were, they missed the cut like a tourist who blinked. I didn't speed up. Hunters who run make noise. I crept through timber, steering by muscle memory and the faint, forgiving glow of snow. The forest took me in, like an old friend, black on black on black. And yet, I knew the road by the way the wheel hummed through my palms. I counted the washboards, 1, 2, 3, then the wide bend with the hidden dip that will crack your axle if you're cocky. The truck rocked, steadied, breathed with me. Every shadow tried to become a danger. None of them earned it. I let the odometer tell me where the spur trail rejoined. The county lane 5 miles south rolled to a stop and watched the highway for the rhythm of approaching light. Nothing. No patient glare easing into view. No amateur overshooting the intersection and slamming brakes. Gone or smarter than me and already waiting at the mill. I pulled back onto the asphalt with the kind of caution that looks like bravery if you're not used to being alone at midnight. I'd lost someone, maybe not the right someone. Clearwater Mill doesn't loom so much as insist on being there. 4 stories of peeled boards, busted windows, and a roofline that forgot its own shape. The river beside it sounded like a crowd trying not to gasp. I parked under the broken sign and took the flashlight. I didn't intend to use. Light invites attention. Darkness invites mistakes. Danny I tried once, then softer, then only in my head. Inside the first floor was a graveyard of old machinery and beer cans. Graffiti told 100 teenage stories that ended before mine began. Stairs on the left, skinnier than I remember stairs being, gave under my weight. I climbed steady hand on the rail, counting each creak like a metronome to keep panic on beat. Second floor empty rooms, a scattering of nails that glinted like teeth. The river's voice was louder here, a cold soundtrack. Danny. I breathed again, and this time the building answered with someone's stifled sob. He was folded small on an overturned crate, the way tall boys fold when they want to be little again. His face had the crumpled look that comes after hours of trying not to cry. "I'm sorry," he said, and I heard every version of those words since he was 2 and spilled sugar on the floor. I helped her. I swear I didn't know what she was. I knelt the boards complaining beneath my knee and put my hands on his cheeks. Cold, damp shaking. "You called me," I said. "You knew enough to call." He told me about coffee shop charm and shared jokes about a woman who learned his orbit in a week and moved into its center by 2. If I could have lifted the shame off him with my hands, I would have. Shame is heavy because it borrows your own strength to crush you. We fix what we can, we face what we must. I said, start at the start. Rachel worked at County Records, which is the polite front desk, to a town's skeleton closet. She knew where paper sleeps and how to wake it without leaving fingerprints. She told my grandson she loved old farm stories, loved the way the valley smells after rain, loved that I'd kept the place when it would have been easier to cash out. Predators study loyalty first. She asked for photos of the house, the deed history, just to help you protect it, the way a wolf asks for a map to the pen. Danny said she made him feel seen. That's the oldest trick. It still works because being seen is rarer than being looked at. None of it felt like coincidence, her timing, her title, her sudden interest in inheritance law. I felt a heat rise that wasn't anger yet, just the chemical before anger. I've watched storms build on these plains. You can smell them an hour before they arrive. It broke when greed did. Rachel wanted more money, more safety, more leverage, words that translate to the same demand when you've stepped too far in. She told Danny she had copies, emails, recordings, traces of payments that attached to names like Burrs. She planned to trade truth for cash until truth bit back. She called me before dawn. Danny said voice gone small again. She was crying. She said someone was following her. She said she'd wear your red coat so you'd spot her at the stop. Then the line went dead. I felt the shape of the morning snap into place. A decoy jacket, a rendezvous never reached a body where I stand to catch the bus. Blackmailers forget one rule: if your partner is ruthless, your leverage is a countdown. Rachel timed hers wrong, or someone else timed it for her. Either way, she never made the trade. Someone took the merchandise and killed the messenger. Danny pressed a thumb drive into my palm like a confession. "It's all here," he said. Emails between her and her, recorded calls, scans of documents. I turned it over, small and ordinary, the way bullets look small, until you meet one up close. "There's a last folder," he added. "It won't open." Rachel said it was everything, the part that would burn the whole thing down, encrypted like it belonged to a government that doesn't acknowledge its own programs. I've never liked computers much, but I respect anything that can keep a secret better than most people do. If the open files showed conspiracy, the locked ones would name architects. Somewhere a password existed, a word that mattered to Rachel more than safety. The mill groaned, settling, or maybe warning. A plan began writing itself behind my eyes: protect the boy. Preserve the drive and find the key. Then the building told us we were no longer alone. Boots on old wood speak a language you don't forget. These said weight confidence more than one man. Danny killed the flashlight, and we let the dark own us. Through the doorway, a beam of light skimmed like a fingertip across a piano's keys. Mrs. Foster, a voice called polite as a debt collector. "We just want to talk." I pulled Danny toward the small office at the back, the one with windows over the river and a door that never learned to shut right. If we ran, we'd rattle the stairs. If we stayed, we'd be cornered. I have been cornered by more honest creatures than men with badges who arrive without invitations. The voice moved closer. "Your son is worried," it said. "Let us take you home." Home meant exposure. Home meant paperwork on my kitchen table and hands in my drawers. I squeezed Danny's wrist, slow breath, steady heart, and answered the way a woman answers who owns her name. A deputy filled the doorway, young crisp uniform, the kind of neutral smile officers practice in mirrors. "Sheriff Brennan sent me," he said, but the eyes didn't match the words. Then she stepped in behind him as if she'd rehearsed the cue. Vanessa suburban war paint stripped to the bones boots, built for bad floors voice like a cold courtroom. "You'll sign the transfer tonight," she said, almost kindly, "and then you'll go home, and then—" Accidents happen on dark roads. Cruelty, when it's confident, tries on gentle like a costume. She held out a pen as if the problem were convenience, not consent. I felt Danny shift anger, heating him from the feet up. I needed him still. The deputy's hand hovered near his holster, not drawing, just reminding. I said Vanessa's name like a prayer someone else would recognize. She smiled, offended by the word. "Let's not make this dramatic," she murmured. "This is just business." "Then let's keep it tidy," I said, lifting the phone. I'd been palming since the stairs. Audio's been rolling since I walked in. Vanessa's face did a trick. I'll remember forever a fast flicker between fury and calculation, as if she were budgeting emotions. Downstairs doors took kicks instead of knobs. Boots thundered. Someone shouted the kind of command that makes even brave men choose the floor. Sheriff Tom's voice cut through clean hall hands where I can see them. The deputy's neutrality cracked like thin ice. Vanessa pivoted toward the window and found a trooper instead of an exit. I didn't smile. Survival is not gloating, it's accounting. I walked the phone into Tom's palm and let our history finish the sentence. He said my name the way honest men say a friend's. "You took a risk," he murmured. "I took a message," I said. "Recording buys time. It doesn't buy verdicts." They led her away. She left a promise in the air. The mill quieted, but quiet isn't peace, just the space your fear uses to change shape. Vanessa under arrest didn't mean Vanessa undone. There are men who build whole careers, turning villains into victims by lunchtime. Paperwork can launder sins cleaner than water. I stood by the river window and let the cold make a case for patience. The thumb drive in my pocket felt heavier than a gun. Open evidence could tie her to fraud. Locked evidence could tie her to murder. One cracks the life you live. The other buries the one she's still trying to take from you. I told Tom what we had and what we didn't. He nodded already, a head already worried. Danny leaned into me, like he used to when thunder shook the barn. "Is it over?" he asked. "It's begun," I said. "Tomorrow they'll come with lawyers and language. We'll answer with proof, not just stories proof." The river kept speaking. We listened and prepared. By morning, the phone arrived before the sun. "Jennifer Tate, counsel for Mrs. Foster." The voice purred, and I didn't miss how she used Vanessa's married name like a shield. She announced bail had been posted, then unfurled threats like contracts, a $5 million civil suit for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and a competency petition to appoint a guardian over my declining faculties. I pictured Vanessa shopping for guardianship, like a handbag take the power of attorney, now accessorize later. Tate's cadence was stainless steel polite, every syllable buffed to a legal shine. I asked if she'd listened to the recording. Context is everything she said, as if context hadn't already bled under a white tarp. Retract publicly, or we proceed. I thanked her for the courtesy and hung up like setting down cutlery. A threat is a weather report. You can complain or you can board the windows. I chose lumber and nails. They wanted me fogged, flustered. I brewed coffee and sharpened my day. Tom doesn't dress bad news in bows. Evie, the encrypted folder won't open yet. Without it, murder's a steep hill. We have fraud in our hands, conspiracy, and reach homicide, still out of grasp. I pressed the phone tight enough to leave a square on my cheek. How long could be weeks, could be never. Honesty is a kindness that stings. I walked to the window and counted fence posts like rosary beads. So we hold the line, I said. We fortify what we can prove and hunt what we can unlock. He exhaled. I'm posting a patrol at your road. Don't mistake presence for safety, but it's something. I've lived long enough to know the difference between comfort and cover. The recording bought time. The drive promised truth. The lock demanded imagination. Tom's last words were a benediction and a warning. Don't meet them alone again. I lied the way women do to men who worry. Of course. Then I started a list. The text arrived like a bully leaning on a locker sign. Withdraw. Quiet life. Refuse. Lose everything. 24 hours. I set the phone down as if it were hot and let the threat walk around my kitchen to see what it could move. Fear will rearrange your furniture if you let it make you bump your shins and blame the dark. I poured my coffee slower, tasted it, decided it needed salt. That's a ranch trick, pinches, sharpen the bitter, make it honest. So I did the same to my fear, a pinch of memory. I've buried a husband and survived harvests that broke better men. A pinch of anger, they wore my red, and a pinch of math. If they're counting hours, they're worried about something on a clock. I texted nothing back. I wrote 2 words on a sticky note. Hold fast. Stuck it to the fridge, then to my chest, then to my mind. When someone gives you a countdown answer with a plan. Robert came by carrying guilt-like groceries. I made him sit. This is our house, I said, emphasizing the plural he keeps misplacing. This time you stand up straight beside me. He nodded, eyes flooded with apologies that would take years to mop. She said you're unsafe. She sells that line to courts the way she sells kitchens to buyer's turnkey. I handed him the list banks to call utilities, to lock down a file of every legitimate signature I've ever made. We build a wall of yeses so they're forged no looks lonely. He swallowed. And Danny with me for now, quiet and occupied. For the first time in months, my son's chin lifted off his chest. A small fire started in him, the kind that remembers it once knew how to burn. I didn't hug him. We aren't there yet. Instead, I gave him work. Work is a bridge for men who can't say sorry without splinters. We spread maps and browser tabs like a second harvest on the table. Elder sales in the last 18 months, I told Danny. Look for a pattern with a name that thinks it's a mountain. He typed, and the county unfurled deeds filings notary. Logs the quiet paper traffic of endings. Summit Properties, he said first. Then 10 minutes later, Summit Development Group. Different shells, same pearl. Addresses that redirect to mail drops. Agent names that smell like rentals. My rage grew disciplined, put on boots. Flag every parcel over 100 acres, every seller over 65, I said. He color-coded dots across a map of lives. This is what predation looks like in America, not fangs forms. A ring binder instead of a getaway car. I felt the old farm woman in me wake up, the one who inventories and stacks and labels, who knows a pattern when it repeats. Predators are tidy until they hurry. We would make them hurry. Danny's voice got thinner as the spreadsheet filled. 4 sellers died within 6 months of closing, he read. 2 accidents on rural roads. 1 fall at home, 1 cardiac event, with no prior history. He didn't say coincidence. Boys still want to believe in weather more than design. I circled each obituary with a pencil until the page looked like a target range. We're not coroners, I said, but we know a calendar when we see one. Summits are climbed by steps. Crimes are climbed by intervals. Insurance policies triggered estates, rushed property lines, redrawn like stitches. You don't need to see the knife if you can read the ledger it leaves behind. I called it what it was, a season of harvesting elders. My chest tightened in a familiar way, not panic, but the breath you take before pushing a stuck truck out of mud. This will be bigger than her, I said, but we start with her. I called Tom back and asked for something improper in the proper way. 15 minutes with Judge Winters before my competency hearing, I said. Not to sway, just to put context where it belongs. Tom sighed the way lawmen sigh when they remember justice isn't the same as procedure. He won't like it. He'll like it less after I said. Impropriety is sometimes what integrity looks like when the clock is wrong. An hour later, Tom rang tomorrow 1:00 p.m. 15 minutes hard stop. I thanked him and laid out my packet timeline of calls, the forged deed next to samples of my real signature, a list of summit transactions, our 4 neat obituaries, a sworn statement about the recording at the mill. I wrote a cover letter in the plainest English I own. Truth performs best without adjectives. If they wanted to test my mind in court, I'd present it first. Ordered, dated, stapled straight. By evening, Danny had the corporate tree, looking like a bad Christmas tiers of LLCs, blinking the same 2 words, Summit Properties, Summit Development. Different registered agents, same P.O. box. Then a branch we didn't expect lit up legal representation. Look, he said, tapping a line item retainer agreements, flowing to a boutique practitioner who rarely advertises and often wins. Peter Mitchell. My teeth found each other. The man who advised me to be quiet had been speaking loudly elsewhere for a long time. Cross-check his filings with county acquisitions. I said, Danny did, and the correlation marched like soldiers. We printed the tree. We sharpened the arrows. This is the part of a storm where the wind changes temperature, and you know hail is coming. Mitchell wasn't a bystander. He was scaffolding. If Vanessa was the sales floor, Mitchell was the back office where the money equipment lives. Their mistake was standing close enough to be photographed together on paper. Memory can be cruel. It replays scenes with better lighting after the fact. I saw the station room again, the lawyer's reassuring baritone. My son's relief at outsourcing backbone. I saw how Mitchell watched me, not with care, with inventory. What did I know? What would I volunteer? Who could I be steered away from? It is a specific humiliation to realize you were shepherded by someone who intended to slaughter your testimony later. I let the feeling burn through instead of burying it. Pride tastes like pennies on the tongue when it bleeds. We don't waste this, I told Danny. We use it, a defense that dirty leaves prints on its own gloves. He nodded already, printing screenshots, clipping docket entries, building a cross-reference like a fence line. I wrote Mitchell's name in ink at the top of my packet, then underlined it twice. I don't always win the first exchange. I'm very good at winning the last one. I called Vanessa because sometimes you tap the hive to hear how many bees are left. She answered with silk and static. I kept my voice flat. I have the real backup and the password. Silence is the truest accent. For a heartbeat, hers was fluent. You're bluffing, she said, but her breath had shifted half an inch toward worry. Then hang up, I offered. She didn't. Lawyers posture, predators calculate. I gave her nothing about where or when, only that the folder she thought dead still had a pulse. Tomorrow, I said, I'll place everything in front of a judge, signed, dated, witnessed. She tried one last card, concern for my confusion. I reminded her I'd navigated 70 harvests of chaos and weather. You can't outweight me, I said. I farm for a living. I ended the call first. Power is sometimes as small as controlling the click. Across the room, Danny exhaled. She felt that he said, good. Patterns don't just repeat, they point. Find where she recruited Rachel, I told Danny. Begin at county records. Then the first summit sale tied to Rachel's family. He dove. Red Lodge surfaced Martha Hartley's ranch, recorded by an employee with a name Rachel used before she changed it. A week 1 filing. A perfect overlap of need access and ambition. Vanessa didn't discover Rachel. They built each other. If the password wasn't a date or a pet, it would be a memory location, somewhere original enough to matter, abandoned enough to hide. I felt the answer arrive, like a boot, finding the rung it can't see. Start where she learned the trick. Start where she lost her grandmother. Start where guilt would tempt her to stash insurance. I circled Red Lodge on the map. Tonight, Danny asked. I looked at the clock and at the note on my fridge. Hold fast. Tonight, I said, before they remember to look backward. We drove north with the patrol car hanging back, like a guardian that didn't want credit. Robert gripped the wheel too tight, the way men hold on when they can't fix anything else. Danny stared at mile markers as if they were test questions he could finally answer. I prayed a quiet, practical prayer, not for miracles. Those are for people who haven't watched crops fail, but for timing. Don't let truth arrive late. The mountains flattened into a colder dark. I narrated landmarks to keep us human, the diner with the blue pie sign, the rusted plow that always looks like a deer in peripheral vision. My mind stacked lists, chain of custody, who to call once we had something where to stash duplicates. Fear kept trying to sit in the front seat. I made it ride him back. By the Red Lodge turnoff, we'd said very few words and made 3 decisions, no heroics, no splitting up, no coat-colored mistakes. The old Hartley house was a black ribcage against the sky char and beams, and the sour smell of rain on ash that never really leaves. The barn, though, still stood, leaning stubborn like elders who refused to sit. Stay behind me, I said, and meant it. In a way, mothers never stop meaning things. Inside, the air tasted of hay that remembers horses. Danny's phone lights skirted dust motes. They rose like ghosts, happy to be noticed. We searched the obvious feed bin's saddle racks, the gap beneath the workbench. Then I saw it letters carved into a stallboard, softened by time, but proud of their shape. Starlight, the mare in Rachel's photograph, the one she loved before learning to love leverage. Guilt and tenderness often share a pocket. If Rachel hid salvation anywhere, she'd hide it where she still believed she was a good girl, brushing a good horse. Here, I said, look with your hands. Old barns creak a language you can't fake. I pressed at the boards, and one answered not with the deep groan of structure, but with the little flirt of movement. This one I whispered. Robert fetched a screwdriver, palms slick, and we worried the nail heads up like impatient dentists. The plank surrendered a thumb's width, then an inch, then enough for a hand. Behind it, plastic sheeting tight as skin, and the hard geometry of a small metal box. My heart did that embarrassing thing where it races like I'm 20 and being asked to dance by fate. I didn't yank it free. I breathed. Evidence wants patience more than applause. I slid the bundle out, checked for moisture, checked for traps. I only know from television, then set it on a hay bale like an altar gift. Somewhere outside, a car door thumped. Of course it did. Truth rarely arrives alone. We move fast and right, I said. Chain of custody from here. Tape around the box, then a latch, then the soft rasp of paper on metal. On top, a folded note in neat, careful print. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. I helped her. I can't let it stand. Password Starlight 9997. I heard Rachel's voice the way you hear a stranger in a church pew, too late to change her verse just in time to understand it. Under the note, another thumb drive, not the sleek one Danny carried. This one was utilitarian, like a tool you don't brag about. She documented everything Danny said, equal parts horror and relief. Because she was good at being bad, I answered, and good criminals keep receipts. A shadow slid across the doorway. Robert stiffened. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Guilt writes letters. Greed brings company. I pocketed the drive, and the note snapped the box shut and squared my shoulders. You can't hide forever inside a stall. Some choices are corrals you step out, or you get branded. Headlights drew a hard rectangle across the barn mouth. Vanessa stepped in as if escorted by an invisible drum line, Mitchell 2 paces back, and with them the kind of men who treat doors like suggestions. You're trespassing on estate property, Mitchell announced, smooth as butter on hot bread. Hand over stolen evidence. He held confidence like a weapon with no safety. Vanessa's eyes went straight to my hands, then my pockets, then calculating my face. "This can be easy," she said, gentle enough to bruise. "Give me what you found. Go home. Let adults finish adult things." Behind her, a large man realigned his stance the way problems realign when they plan to be physical. I glanced at Robert. He looked ready to swing and lose. I glanced at Danny. He looked ready to run and regret it. "No," I said very softly, the way you speak to a skittish horse. "We'll do this clean." And then I made clean very public. "I've been live streaming for 10 minutes, I told them, tone polite as church. Sheriff, state police, 3 local stations. It was like pulling a rug where only Vanessa had been standing. Her balance wavered, not her posture, she's too trained for that, but the math behind her gaze changed. Mitchell lifted a hand as if to swat a fly he couldn't see. "Turn it off," he ordered, remembering he didn't have the jurisdiction to order me. "Anything." "Say hello," I offered. "You're already on." The big men glanced at each other. An animal flicker fight or leave. Sirens far off stitched the dark to us. "This is harassment." Vanessa tried pivoting into victim like a ballerina, into second position. "This is documentation," I replied. Document bullies, and they lose their appetite. Somewhere outside, tires found gravel with purpose. Time, which had been leaning against the fence, finally climbed over and joined our side. Red and blue washed the pasture like a fever breaking. Troopers fanned through the doorway in a choreography born of repetition and danger. Hands where I can see them cut the air. Power changed addresses. Mitchell began a sentence that ended with a metal clink. The hired muscle lifted their palms, discovering humility. Vanessa kept talking she always does when cornered about estates and theft and elderly confusion, until Tom stepped inside and said my name like punctuation. "Evie," I nodded, evidence in pocket. "Live feed rolling." He didn't smile, good cops don't, when the camera's on, but his shoulders lowered half an inch. "Mrs. Foster, a trooper, told Vanessa you're under arrest." She flinched at the misses more than the arrest. Some people love status even as it drags them down. As they turned her, she looked at me over her shoulder, eyes dry and bright. "Threats are wasted on women who plant in droughts." I looked back, unblinking. Outside, the night smelled of wet earth and adrenaline. I placed the metal box in Tom's hands, like passing a newborn across a hospital curtain. 6 years of rot, I said. "Names, money, methods." He caught the weight literal and otherwise, and nodded for an evidence tech who moved with the reverence of a librarian handling a first edition. "You just opened a door for a lot of families," Tom said. I thought of men who died on roads they could drive blind, of women who fell at home without clumsy bones of signatures that never belonged to the hands beneath them. "Don't let it swing shut," I said. He promised procedure and patience. I promised copies and stubbornness. Danny leaned in close enough for me to feel his breath steadying. Robert exhaled like a man who'd been holding in 20 years. We weren't finished, not close, but our feet had found concrete. The barn behind us groaned, relieved to be a witness and not an accomplice. Morning smoothed the edges off the night. At 1 o'clock, Judge Winters granted me 15 minutes and used 5 to cancel the rest. He read my packet in silence, eyes moving like a mower over thick grass. "Ms. Foster," he said finally, "the court will not be entertaining questions about your capacity today." Capacity is a knife word when wielded by people who want your keys. I felt the blade set down. Orders went out, stay on the recordings. Impound the forged deed and the power of attorney documents, notify oversight about county records. I sat straighter than my age likes, and for the first time in weeks, felt my shoulders not fighting invisible weight. If you've never had your sanity petitioned like a broken appliance, you won't understand the relief when a stranger in a robe tells the room you still own yourself. Outside the courthouse, the wind moved the flag enough to sound like applause. I didn't bow. I went home and made lists. Forensics treated the drives like bomb squads treat packages. Files bloomed on screens. Vanessa cajoling, directing pricing grief. Mitchell laundering the language. Deputies and clerks taking envelopes the color of bad decisions. There were ledgers crosswalking dates to deaths. There was a video grainy but clear enough of a negotiation that ended with an accident 6 months later. Then the oldest wound a clip of Rachel recounting her grandmother's fate, not to confess but to rehearse the script she'd sell to other grandmothers' grandkids. She taught me to catalog, Rachel said. So I did, confession by competence. Empires rarely fall to moral arguments. They fall to receipts in the wrong hands. Tom called it the largest elder fraud case he'd seen in his tenure. I called it Tuesday, finally answering for a string of Tuesdays before it. When you fight people who use paperwork as weapons, you don't swing back, you staple. And you staple straight. Divorce papers are just paper until the pen touches down and turns them into time served. Robert's hand shook his mouth. A tight apology he couldn't afford to open. Don't flog yourself, I said. Poured him coffee and slid the cup until it touched his knuckles. Repentance is a road, not a pit. He nodded, eyes wet. The way grown sons hate. I should have seen. You saw what she wanted you to see, I answered. The rest is work. He signed each stroke, reclaiming a small jurisdiction inside his own chest. I didn't clap. Freedom isn't a party when it follows blindness. It's a chore list. He asked if I forgave him. I told him forgiveness is a verb I do by the day today. Yes, by supper I'll decide again. He half laughed, which is how men cry without admitting it. He left with tasks instead of shame. A better trade every time. Grief doesn't argue with logic. It eats it. Danny sat on the porch steps, the farm stretching out like a bandage big enough for both of us. Sometimes I miss her, he said, voice careful, as if missing a liar made him one. That's normal, I told him. You miss who she said she was. That ghost is stubborn. He looked at his hands as if the wrong fingerprints might still be there. I helped her. You helped me, I corrected. You warned me, you brought the drive. You walked into a mill instead of away from one. He shook his head. Shame again the bully that uses your own shoulders to shove you. Therapy isn't weakness, I added. It's a wrench, Titan. What's loose, loosen what's stuck. He smiled without teeth and promised to keep his appointments. What if I fall for the wrong person again? Then you'll spot the right questions sooner, I said. And you'll call me sooner, too. The boy nodded. The man did, too. The order came down plain as fence posts forged. Deed voided power of attorney, shredded injunctions stacked like hay bales. Title reverts to me, no asterisks. Summit's pretty logos didn't survive contact with subpoenas. The shells cracked, revealing bank accounts that smelled of bleach and fear. The state froze assets the way winter freezes a stock tank, quick, clean, absolute. Restitution funds were established, names matched to parcels, parcels matched to obituaries. I stood on my porch and said nothing while the wind wrote yes across my fields. People think land is a rectangle on a map. It isn't. It's a ledger of hours and backs, a song your boots know. When the clerk called to confirm the entry, I thanked her with a voice that surprised us both, steady, older than me, young enough to plant. The farm didn't cheer, it exhaled. The house loosened a quiet board. Even the shovel by the door leaned easier against the wall, as if relieved to belong again to the hands that earned it. Courthouses host two kinds of silence. The kind you keep out of respect and the kind you build out of pain you don't yet trust with air. In a conference room with stale coffee and good intentions, I met sons and daughters whose elders had fallen, swerved, failed to yield, and then failed to breathe. We didn't trade tragedies like baseball cards. We traded the nod that says, I know the shape of your empty chair. A woman my age gripped my palm and squeezed a rhythm. Only grief teaches 3 beats of we're here, we're here, we're here. A rancher with hands like weather thanked me for starting the avalanche, which is just a mountain's way of admitting it held too long. No one asked for speeches. We compared notes on probate clerks and insurance adjusters on winter roads and summer chores on how stubborn elders are, and why that stubbornness is exactly what predators try to launder out of records. We didn't forgive the past. We made room for the next breath. She introduced herself with the genealogy. First, Catherine Wells, Martha Hartley was my aunt. Then she added the thing that mattered more. I remember Rachel before she learned to weaponize charm. Catherine's eyes carried 2 funerals. She thanked me for stopping a machine she'd been pushing against for years without knowing where the gears were. I told her the truth I could stand to say out loud. Rachel left us a map because she finally hated the destination. She cataloged everything I said. She was trying to build a door. Catherine nodded the kind of nod that forgives the child without acquitting the adult. My aunt taught us to keep receipts, she said softly. Rachel kept them the wrong way for too long. Then she kept them right. We didn't hug. We aren't built for easy reconciliation. We exchanged numbers and a promise to attend sentencings if they let us speak. Sometimes gratitude is just a shared sentence finished without stumbling. We doubled the patch because defiance likes arithmetic. Danny measured rows, the way therapy measures progress straight enough for giving of wobble. We knelt in soil that remembers everything and asked it to remember sweeter. The first time we planted strawberries together, he was 7 and we were greedy. This time we were greedy on purpose for ritual, for red stains on fingertips, for a harvest that doesn't involve headstones. We didn't talk about the coat or the mill or the thumb drives. We talked about mulching birds and which neighbor still owes me a pie tin. When he laughed at a joke I barely made, I let myself believe in ordinary again. A plant is a declaration I am betting on later. We tucked crowns into cool earth and pressed them down like signatures we meant. Spring will decide, as it always does. But the act itself was the point, hands moving forward. Roots choosing down 2 people who outlived a plot, choosing plot lines of their own. Tom parked crooked on purpose, the way men do when they want to pretend they're just stopping by. He said I scared him half to death and saved him half his caseload. You took a wild risk, he added, which is lawman for don't ever do that again unless it works. I told him age isn't caution, it's calibration. You learn when to wait out weather and when to plant in a daring warm spell. He snorted and called it farmer math. We spoke of the deputy who flipped of the clerk, who cried in booking of the prosecutor who requested extra coffee and fewer adjectives. You taught us something, he said. Recordings and receipts beat righteous anger 9 times out of 10. I already knew. Righteous anger kept me upright. Recordings won the room. Before he left, he put a hand on the porch post like it was a shoulder. Call me sooner next time, he said. I did, I answered. You picked up. In the end, Vanessa traded the last thing people like her hoard control for what she couldn't buy, back time. Life without parole read simpler than any closing document she ever drafted. The plea took oxygen out of the defense like someone opened a door in a vacuum. She'll name names now. Empires crumble fastest when their architects panic. I didn't celebrate. Courtrooms aren't parties. I watched her shoulders, not her mouth. Arrogance collapses in the spine first. Mitchell will find his own reckoning. Men who launder words eventually can't read their reflections. The judge read counts like an accountant balancing a wicked ledger. 4 murders acknowledged by a system that prefers not to say the word. Fraud stacked beside them like firewood that will burn all winter in other cases. I walked out into noon daylight that didn't need sirens to be bright. Some justice feels like thunder. This felt like fence repair, tedious, necessary, finally holding. People confuse patience with surrender because they've never watched a fence rot the post before it drops the rail. Patience isn't passive, it's pressure applied at a survivable rate. I learned it from droughts that don't announce themselves, from calves that won't take a bottle at first, from men who come around to the truth slowly and then all at once. I sharpened patience against Vanessa's rush. Every time she demanded hours, I answered with seasons. Every time she built urgency, I built a file. A dull blade is safer for the hand that holds it and crueler to the rope it saws. Keep sawing, I told myself, when the encrypted folder laughed at our experts and when bail money greased wheels that should have stuck. Keep sawing through lies until they heat from friction and split on their own. In the end, we didn't cut her empire down with a swing. We wore it out. It fell because it couldn't stand our waiting. I didn't throw it away. I hung it where I would pass it. 10 times a day inside the barn, not by the door. A warning deserves a shrine more than a closet. I run my fingers over the sleeve, sometimes feel the stitching that could have been my shroud. Fear would like me to never touch it again. Wisdom says, look it in the eye until it looks back and blinks first. I tell the coat what it taught me. Color isn't safety routine, isn't prayer visibility, can be a trap if someone else is taking attendance. But I also tell it this. We still walk roads in winter. We still go to town on Tuesdays and Fridays. We are careful, not caged. Every time I pass the hook, I rehearse a sentence I want engraved somewhere small. Be alert, be kind, be hard to move. The coat doesn't answer. It doesn't need to. It already spoke once loudly enough for a lifetime. He came to Sunday supper without a script, which is its own courage. We ate roast that behaved potatoes that didn't, and let conversation find its pace like a creek after thaw. Robert told Danny truths that start as gravel in a man's mouth and end as smooth stones in a boy's pocket. I should have listened sooner. I was afraid I picked peace over right. No fireworks, no groveling, just sentences that didn't dodge. Danny didn't make him crawl. Boys forgive faster when men stop performing. I watched the exchange like a weather vane checking for a wind I could trust. It turned steady. After dishes, Robert asked me for the old family tools he'd once said were clutter. I want to fix what I can fix, he said, which is fatherhood's real job. I sent him home with a toolbox and a list. He left lighter, which is how you know a man finally put down what wasn't his to carry. He registered for classes on a Wednesday because Wednesdays are made for halfway decisions that turn into whole ones. One semester at a time, he said, and I heard the therapist in his throat, the one teaching him to build bridges between mornings. He picked engineering again, but added an ethics elective that made him grin at his own cliché. I told him clichés are just truths that worked overtime. He asked if he could keep coming out on weekends to help with fences and rows. A degree won't teach your hands, I said. The farm can. He kissed my hair the way tall boys do when they forget they're men. In the driveway, he paused like he was checking for a ghost. I still think about her, he admitted. Good, I said. Thinking means you're steering. Not thinking is how ditches happen. He laughed, got in the car, and drove toward a future that finally looked like a road, not a trap. Age is not an apology, it's an archive. People misread our quiet as surrender because they cannot hear the card catalog flipping behind our eyes. We don't talk because we're slow. We talk less because we're cross-referencing. I have collected decades of tells the way liars blink, the way salesmen say, just the way bullies smile when rooms are full. I know how winter comes for an uninsulated truth, how summer exposes rot, how time is the most honest cross-examiner living. We didn't sit still through this, we held still. Held like ground holds seed, like lungs hold breath before a dive. The difference matters. When I say nothing now, it's because saying something would cost leverage. When I speak, it's because the moment has earned the words. If you want to mistake that for weakness, that's a bet. I've seen taken and lost. My silence isn't empty. It's loaded. Pressure sells peace under fluorescent lights and return policies. It tells you to sign for quiet and call it safety. I was offered that brand of calm, shrink-wrapped, and perfumed. Just surrender the keys, the acres, the voice. Let professionals finish you politely. I chose noise instead, phone calls, filings, confrontations that make hands shake and truths stand up. When they backed me toward be reasonable, I asked for receipts. When they counted hours, I counted seasons. So here's my question, and I want the real answer, not the company line. When someone tells you to give up what's yours to avoid, trouble, do you take the small silence they're selling, or do you gather proof and make a louder kind? Tell me which you pick and tell me why. The comments aren't just a box, they're a ledger. Write your choice down, then read it back to yourself. Does it sound like you or like someone hoping the bully likes them? And if your pen shakes good, that's your pulse proving you're alive. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's paperwork signed with trembling hands. Don't gift them your quiet. Keep the dates, save the voicemails, name who said what. When the door opens, walk in, standing up, and take witnesses along. I am the woman in the red coat who chose not to wear it. I buried a husband, kept a farm, outlived a murder attempt, and helped pull down a machine that fed on the old because I refused to sign away my name. That's the payoff, not headlines, not applause, but standing where I've always stood and knowing the ground still knows me. The live stream, the receipts, the password in a stall called Starlight Threads, braided into a rope strong enough to drag truth into daylight. The red coat hangs where I can see it. Fear doesn't. Robert shows up on Sundays with sentences that don't dodge. Danny plants strawberries and takes notes on ethics. Sheriff Tom answers when I call. Patience, it turns out, is a blade that cuts granite if you keep sawing. Money bought them time. Time bought me clarity. If you stayed with me this far, thank you. I've told you my harvest. Now it's your turn. What ground won't you give up, no matter who asks?